In New York City, indoor dining was shut down this week as part of Governor Andrew Cuomo's plan to slow the spread of the coronavirus. This is on top of New York City's mayor, Bill de Blasio, pushing for a citywide shutdown of non-essential businesses after Christmas. The state saw a jump in cases in recent weeks, with the overall positivity rate hovering near 5.5%. Statewide, officials say New York has seen more than 794,000 cases, with more than 35,000 people having died from the virus. Across all of New York City's boroughs, state health officials are reporting more than 362,000 cases confirmed, with more than 24,000 deaths. Joining us now to talk about this is Erin Durkin. She's a reporter for Politico New York and the co-author of New York Playbook. Erin, welcome. Great to have you with us. So when the governor announced indoor dining would close, he also presented data suggesting the increased cases are not being driven by bars and restaurants, but by private indoor gatherings. So if that is the case, why move forward with these restaurant closures?
Yeah, that's right. According to the data that the governor put out, more than 70% of cases are believed to come from either private social gatherings or also household spread, people catching it, from folks that they live with. And only about 1.4% were traced to restaurants and bars. But there's an important caveat that has to come with that, which is that nearly 80% of cases they haven't identified a source for one way or the other. They just don't know where they're coming from. So those numbers are only based on the small minority of cases where they're actually able to find a source. And of course, it's much easier to trace a case to, you had a gathering with your friends, or you caught it from your husband or your brother who you live with, as opposed to tracing it to a public place. And so, the governor's rationale, that he cited was, the new CDC guidance, which highlighted the particular risks of indoor dining. But it's also worth noting that he only closed it down for New York City. So in spite of those risks, he allowed it to continue in other parts of the state.
Right. But you do raise a good point, though. It is hard to know exactly where a lot of these infections are coming from. So, Erin, the move to close indoor dining does come at a time when the restaurant industry, though, is really struggling to survive the pandemic. We are now 3 days into those closures. How are things going? Are restaurants able to maintain a robust outdoor dining plan? And what are the biggest concerns as we head into winter?
Yeah, things are going, really quite badly for the restaurant industry. You've had many, many restaurants that have already closed and others that, are on the brink of having to shut down. Outdoor dining is still allowed, and it's allowed throughout the winter. But, for instance, today it's going to start snowing in the next couple hours, and there's actually an order that they have to shut down outdoor dining in the roadways as of 2 p.m. today because of this snow emergency. That'll only last a day or two, but you have these logistical challenges of doing outdoor dining when it's, cold, when it's snowy, when it's going into the winters. And restaurants were already kind of hanging on by a thread. They were only allowed to do 25% indoor dining. Even when they were allowed to do indoor dining, a lot of people just weren't comfortable doing indoor dining, so they weren't getting a lot of business. So they've really been thrown for a loop over and over again. And, a lot of restaurants, again, have already closed, but others are saying they might just throw in the towel at this point. This might be the last straw that might cause them to close down.
Devastating news. But Erin, of course, we know that, New York City is really an economic engine for most of the state. And so obviously what happens in New York City is important for the state overall. How is the city faring compared to the rest of the state?
Well, it's interesting. During the first wave of the pandemic, the city was by far the worst. With the most number of infections, the most number of deaths. It was very concentrated in New York City and to some extent its suburbs. This time around, that's not necessarily the case. The numbers are getting worse and worse in the city, but they're also getting worse and worse in the rest of the state. The Buffalo area is having is being particularly hard hit right now. Other parts of the state that didn't really have a huge problem the first time around. Some of the less urban areas are now getting hit that did not the first time around. So at this point, New York City is getting worse, but it is not necessarily an outlier compared to the rest of the state.
All right, well, we just have to keep our fingers crossed that New York City and New York State and the entire country gets through this winter without too much damage. All right, Erin Durkin, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.